I don't talk about this often. Even now, after all this time, it feels like unearthing something I buried very carefully. My name's Daisy, and for a long time I thought loyalty, real bedrock loyalty, was like a shield, that it would keep the worst parts of the world at bay. But when the ground finally gave way under me, it wasn't some dramatic earthquake. It was quiet, almost like being erased one gentle stroke at a time. If you've ever poured your heart into someone, only to find yourself standing there with nothing but echoes, stay with me, because what they didn't count on was that I wasn't just going to disappear. I've decided to start a new life without you. The words, they just hung there. Not shouted, not even angry, just stated. We were in the Old Town Community Hall, the one with the slightly squeaky floorboards and the smell of old varnish and coffee. We'd rented it for our daughter Chloe's college graduation party. Streamers, a slightly lopsided cake, the works. Marcus, my husband of 28 years, still had his glass of sparkling cider raised. He was supposed to be toasting Chloe, her achievements, her future. Instead the chatter, the laughter, it just stopped, like someone hit a mute button. Forks clinked down. I could feel 50 pairs of eyes, maybe more, ping-ponging between Marcus and me. Waiting. I knew what they were expecting. The gasp, the tears, maybe me throwing my cider in his face. The big scene. Instead, I found myself smiling. A small, tired smile, I think. Congratulations on your honesty, Marcus. My voice sounded surprisingly steady, even to me. I'm Daisy Miller. I'm 54 years old. And up until that exact second, I thought I'd been playing the part of devoted wife, loving mother pretty darn perfectly. I'd pressed pause on my own dreams, my own career ideas, to be the bedrock for him. Through his next big thing that never quite launched, that phase where he was convinced artisanal pickles were our future. And then, oh man, the hand-carved birdhouses. So many phases of him finding himself. And through it all, I raised Chloe, our brilliant, beautiful daughter. She was sitting right beside me, her graduation gown still a little stiff, her expression. It was like watching a statue crack. Frozen. Utterly horrified. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw her. Jenna Vance. Marcus's girlfriend. So much younger. She was at a back table, fidgeting with a napkin, surrounded by people I'd known for decades. People I'd invited to my daughter's party. My friends. The same friends who apparently knew all about Marcus and Jenna, but never thought to maybe, give me a heads up. The same Jenna who'd been to our house for barbecues. The same Jenna who'd once called me, asking for advice about her own career path. The irony wasn't lost on me even then. With a calmness I didn't really feel, but had learned to project over years of practice, I reached into my handbag. My fingers closed around a crisp, cream-colored envelope. I pulled it out and placed it very gently beside Marcus's plate, right next to his half-eaten piece of cake. "What's this?" he asked. That triumphant, almost smug look he'd had, it wavered. "Just a little. Something for you to read later," I said, keeping my voice low and even. Then I turned to Chloe. Her face was so pale. I leaned in and kissed her cheek. Her skin felt cold. "I am so proud of you, sweetheart. So proud. This day, this is still about you. About everything you've achieved." Then I stood up, smoothed down the front of my dress. It felt important somehow to look composed. I looked out at our guests, their faces a blur of shock and curiosity. "Please," I said, my voice carrying a little more than I intended. "Enjoy your meal. Enjoy the cake. I wish you all a wonderful afternoon." And with that, I turned and walked towards the exit. My head high. I could feel every single one of those 50 pairs of eyes on my back. The heavy door of the community hall swung shut behind me with a soft thud, cutting off the first wave of nervous, excited whispers. Outside, the spring-filled summer air, thick and warm, wrapped around me. It wasn't oppressive, though. For the first time in what felt like forever, I could actually breathe. Deeply. Then I heard it. The hall door creaked open, then slammed shut. Footsteps, quick and urgent, on the gravel path. "Daisy, what in the hell is this? What have you done?" Marcus's voice. Not confident anymore. High-pitched. Almost frantic. I kept walking. I even allowed myself a tiny, almost invisible smile. That envelope I just handed him? That was the beginning. The very first carefully placed step of a plan I'd been putting together piece by meticulous piece, for months. You see, I'd always been the practical one. The planner. Marcus, he was the dreamer, the risk-taker. Which sounded romantic, but in reality it meant I was the one who kept the lights on, who made sure there was food on the table, who built the safety net he always seemed to need. I was the one who squirreled away money for Chloe's education when Marcus decided to invest a huge chunk of our savings in his buddy's scheme to sell gourmet dog biscuits online. Spoiler, it didn't work out. I was the one picking up extra projects at Finso Solutions, where I worked as a finance manager when he had his midlife, well, let's call it a career redirection. He quit his perfectly good, stable job to follow his passion for making custom-designed cutting boards. That passion, if I remember correctly, lasted about 6 months, maybe 7, until he got bored. My own dreams? Opening a small financial consultancy, specifically to help women navigate their money, their futures? They were always on the back burner. After Chloe graduates, I tell myself. After Marcus's latest venture stabilizes. After. There was always another after. About 3 months before that disastrous graduation party, I started noticing odd things. Little discrepancies in our shared investment portfolio statements. Small, regular transfers to an account number I didn't recognize. After managing our family's finances down to the penny for almost 20 years, these little irregularities, they weren't just red flags. They were giant, waving crimson banners. I could have confronted him right then, made a scene, demanded answers. But something stopped me. Maybe it was just a gut feeling, that cold knot in my stomach. Or maybe it was the slow, creeping distance that had been growing between us for the past year. Like a quiet tide going out, leaving more and more barren sand. So, instead of yelling, I started digging. Quietly. Carefully. What I found, oh man. It was so much worse than I'd even let myself imagine. Marcus hadn't just been careless. He'd been systematically siphoning money from our joint funds into a separate, hidden account. For over a year. He'd been taking Jenna to expensive restaurants, the kind we hadn't been to in ages. He'd bought her jewelry. He'd even been looking at condos down by the lake, planning their cozy future, all while telling me we needed to tighten our belts, be more mindful of our retirement savings. The hypocrisy, it stung more than the lies, almost. And then there were the text messages. He'd left his phone unlocked on the nightstand one morning. A simple, careless mistake. But it opened a door I hadn't even known was there. Messages about their new life. About how he was finally going to be free. About their grand plan for the day after Chloe's graduation. That was the day he'd picked to make his dramatic exit from our marriage, to ride off into the sunset with Jenna. He wanted to wait until after her big day, you see. Didn't want to spoil it for her. The consideration was just breathtaking. What Marcus had forgotten, or maybe never really understood, was that I wasn't just a homemaker who balanced the checkbook. I'd been a financial professional for nearly 30 years. I understood money trails like a bloodhound understood a scent. I knew how to trace assets, how to find hidden accounts. And most importantly, I remembered the prenuptial agreement we'd signed all those 28 years ago. Back when I had a little family money and he had big dreams. He'd insisted on that prenup, ironically, to protect his future earnings, his potential. And tucked away in that prenup, in a clause he'd probably forgotten existed, was a fidelity clause. A little detail that was about to become his biggest nightmare. So, while Marcus was busy plotting his romantic escape with Jenna, I was quietly, methodically, building my case. I met with Mr. Henderson, a lawyer who came highly recommended, specializing in exactly these kinds of messy situations. I documented every single hidden transfer, every suspicious withdrawal. I gathered proof of their affair, dates, times, places. I had divorce papers drawn up ready to go. I timed everything with precision. I knew Marcus. I knew he'd want to wait until after Chloe's graduation to avoid ruining her big day. He'd pat himself on the back for his sensitivity. What he didn't expect, what he couldn't have fathomed, was that I'd have him served with those divorce papers the very morning of her graduation, before his big, public announcement. But even then, with those papers filed but still sealed within the court system, not yet visible to him or his future, no-dubbed expensive lawyer, Marcus had no idea. He thought he was in control. He didn't know I was always 3 steps ahead. I didn't go back to the community hall, of course. There was nothing left for me there. Instead, I drove to our house, our 2-story house on Maple Street, the one with the slightly crooked mailbox and the rose bushes I babied every spring. We bought it 15 years ago. The house Marcus, according to those text messages I wasn't supposed to have seen, had already promised to Jenna. I parked in the driveway, the gravel crunching under the tires, a familiar sound that suddenly felt foreign. I walked in. Our shared space. For over a decade, this was home. Everything looked the same. The family photos on the mantelpiece, Chloe's school pictures, a goofy one of us on vacation years ago, the old grandfather clock in the hall, the one that had belonged to my dad, its tick-tock a steady heartbeat in the house. The worn leather armchair where Marcus and I used to sit, side by side, dreaming about our future, Chloe's future. All those years ago. Yet, standing there in that familiar quiet, everything felt irrevocably changed. Alien. I went upstairs to the master bedroom. Our bedroom. I opened the closet, and there they were. Marcus's suitcases, already packed, tucked neatly in the back behind his winter coats, ready for his grand departure the next day. I almost had to smile. His predictability was comforting in a strange way. He was always so meticulous about his clothes, his appearance, but so careless, so reckless with the things that truly mattered. My phone started buzzing in my purse, non-stop. Messages from friends who'd been at the party, full of exclamation points and question marks. Messages from Chloe, bless her heart. Even a confused text from Sarah, Marcus's sister, who'd flown in from out of state for Chloe's graduation. I only replied to Chloe, "I'm okay, sweetie. Really. This isn't your burden. Don't let it be. Enjoy your day. Celebrate. We'll talk tonight. I love you." I'd shielded Chloe from the ugliness for months. I didn't want this. This mess to cast a shadow over her final semester, her exams, her graduation. She'd be angry, I knew, that I hadn't told her sooner. But I hoped eventually she'd understand why I tried to protect her. Chloe had inherited my practical streak, thankfully, along with a good dose of her father's charm. A potent combination. It had gotten her through college with honors. She was strong. She'd be okay. About 3 hours later, I heard his car pull into the driveway, tires spitting gravel. The front door slammed open so hard the picture frames on the wall rattled. "Daisy," he shouted. His voice, raw and angry, echoed through the silent house. "Where are you?" I was in the living room, sitting on the sofa, my laptop open. I'd been reviewing some documents Mr. Henderson had sent over. I closed it slowly, deliberately, as he stormed in. His face was flushed, a dark mottled red. The cream-colored envelope was clutched in his hand, crumpled now. "What is the meaning of this?" he demanded, waving the papers, copies of the divorce filing, in my face. "You served me with divorce papers? Today? Of all days?" "I thought it aligned rather nicely with your own plans," I replied. My voice was calm. It was important to stay calm. "You wanted to start your new life, Marcus. I'm simply helping to facilitate that transition." You had no right to. I had every right, I interrupted, my voice still steady, but with an edge now. Just as you had every right to choose Jenna. We all make choices, Marcus. These are ours. He scoffed, a harsh, ugly sound. That prenup expired years ago, Daisy. Any decent lawyer will tell you that. His voice was suddenly smug, confident again. He thought he'd found his loophole. I allowed myself that small smile again. The one I'd been practicing internally. Actually, Marcus, it didn't. If you'll recall, or perhaps if you bothered to read it again recently, Section 12 specifically states that the fidelity clause, well, it remains in full effect for the entire duration of the marriage. I paused, letting that sink in. Your lawyer really should have explained that to you. Oh wait. I tilted my head slightly. You didn't consult one before making your announcement, did you? The color, that angry red, drained from his face. Gone. Leaving him looking pale, almost gray. Reality, cold and hard, was dawning. The prenup. The one he had insisted on all those years ago to protect his imaginary future wealth, was now going to cost him everything. The house on Maple Street. The small vacation condo we owned out near Savannah. His portion of our retirement accounts, the ones I'd painstakingly built. His grand dramatic gesture at Chloe's graduation party. It had just become the most expensive public announcement of his entire life. You can't do this to me, he stammered, collapsing onto the sofa opposite me. Not stormed, not demanded. Collapsed. We built this life together, Daisy. And you chose to end it, I replied, my voice softer now, but no less firm. Just not quite in the way you planned, I suppose. Marcus's phone started buzzing in his pocket. A frantic, insistent vibration. He glanced down at it, a flicker of annoyance, then ignored it. Jenna, no doubt. Wondering where her knight in shining armor was. Why he wasn't sweeping her off her feet according to their carefully orchestrated timeline. You've always been calculating, Daisy. But this is cold, he said, trying a different tactic now. Appealing to sentiment. What about our history? 28 years together. Does that mean nothing to you? I looked at him then. Really looked at him. This man I had loved, truly loved, for nearly 3 decades. The man who had held my hand through 2 devastating miscarriages before we were blessed with Chloe. The man who, once upon a time, had surprised me with a weekend trip to Charleston for our 10th anniversary, just because. When had he changed so completely? Or had this person, this selfish, deceitful man, been there all along, hidden beneath a veneer I'd been too devoted, too trusting to see through? Our history meant everything to me, Marcus, I answered, and it was the honest truth. My voice trembled just a little. That's why your betrayal, why it cut so deep. His expression softened for a fleeting moment. Maybe he saw an opening, a crack in my resolve. Then maybe we can fix this. Daisy, I made a mistake. Terrible mistake. People make mistakes. This wasn't a mistake, Marcus, I said, my voice hardening again. The brief flicker of old hurt was gone, replaced by a chilling clarity. This was a calculated, deliberate plan, spanning more than a year. You didn't trip and fall into an affair. You systematically moved our money. You went looking at properties with her, planning your future while lying to mine. You planned to announce our separation publicly at our daughter's graduation party, to humiliate me, to make sure I couldn't make a scene. His face hardened again, the brief vulnerability gone. You're exaggerating. You're being dramatic. Am I? I reached for my phone, which was resting on the coffee table. I opened the recording app. His own voice filled the quiet living room. Clear as day. After the graduation, I'll tell her it's over. A public setting is better. She won't make a scene in front of everyone. Then a woman's voice. Jenna's. Lighter, a little breathless. And she has absolutely no idea about the money, right? And Marcus again, confident, almost boasting. None. Daisy trusts me completely. Always has. That's her weakness, you know. The blood completely drained from his face this time. He looked green. You recorded our conversations? That's illegal, Daisy. You can't do that. Actually, in this state, it's perfectly legal when one party to the conversation consents, Marcus. And given that you were discussing your plans to defraud me in my own home, where you were on speakerphone in your study and I happened to overhear, well, let's just say Mr. Henderson found it quite compelling. I kept my tone even. I didn't record your private moments with Jenna, if that's what you're worried about. I'm not cruel. Just the conversations about your detailed plans to commit financial fraud against your wife of 28 years. Marcus lurched to his feet, agitated, pacing the small space in front of the fireplace. I need to make some calls. Of course, I said. Your attorney might be a good place to start. Assuming you have one who specializes in family law, not just artisanal pickle businesses. I couldn't resist. I'll be staying at Sarah's tonight. Sarah's? He sputtered, stopping his pacing. My sister's house? I nodded. Yes. She's actually quite upset with you, Marcus. Deeply disappointed. This I knew would be another blow. She was the one who first spotted you and Jenna together, you know? Last Christmas at the market. She didn't tell me right away. She confronted you first like a loyal sister would. You promised her it was nothing, just a casual acquaintance. You swore you'd end whatever it was. When she realized you'd lied to her, that you hadn't ended it, that you were still seeing Jenna, that's when she came to me. He looked stunned. Marcus had always assumed his family would side with him, no matter what. He never imagined Sarah, his own sister, would choose me. His rock. Everyone's betraying me, he muttered, more to himself than to me. Ironic, isn't it? I said softly. I stood up, picked up my purse and a small overnight bag I'd packed earlier that morning. It was sitting by the door. You have until tomorrow evening, I said, my voice calm, businesslike, to remove your personal belongings from the house. After that, the locks will be changed. As I headed towards the front door, Marcus called after me, a new note of desperation in his voice. Panic. What about Chloe? Daisy, have you even thought about how this affects her? Our daughter? I paused, my hand on the doorknob, and for the first time, a tremor of real anger, hot and sharp, broke through my carefully constructed calm. I turned back to face him. Don't you dare use our daughter as a shield, Marcus. Don't you dare try to manipulate me with her. You certainly weren't thinking about Chloe or her feelings when you were planning your new beachfront life with Jenna, using money that should have gone towards Chloe's future, towards our future. His phone buzzed again, loudly. This time he looked at it and groaned, a deep theatrical groan. Problem? I asked a little too sweetly. He ran a hand through his already disheveled hair. Jenna. She's at the apartment already. The new one. She's moved all her things in. I couldn't help it. A small genuine smile touched my lips. Oh, the apartment you co-signed the lease on last month? The one you put in both your names, so confident were you? Marcus nodded, looking utterly bewildered, like a child who just had his favorite toy snatched away. You might want to check with the leasing office about that, Marcus. I said, my voice gentle now. That application? It was flagged for some credit irregularities. It was never actually finalized. The agent called our home phone a few weeks ago, needing to verify some information. I handled it myself. I opened the door and walked out, leaving Marcus standing alone in the hallway of the house that was no longer his, to face the first of many, many consequences of his grand new life. A life that was unraveling thread by thread, faster than he could possibly process. Sarah, Marcus's sister, lived in a cozy little place near the river, filled with books and plants and the smell of good coffee. When I arrived, her car already in the driveway, she greeted me with a fierce, protective hug that spoke volumes. I just heard from Chloe, she said, her arm still around my shoulders as she pulled me inside. Are you really okay, Daisy? I'm better than I expected to be, I admitted, following her into her bright, sun-drenched kitchen. A bottle of red wine and 2 glasses were already on the counter. She knew me well. I never ever thought Marcus would make such a spectacle, Sarah said, pouring the wine. Her hand was steady, but her eyes were troubled. The community hall? In front of everyone? He's completely lost his mind. It was calculated, Sarah, I explained, taking the offered glass. The wine was cool, smooth. It was meant to humiliate me. A public rejection. So I couldn't fight back, couldn't object without looking hysterical. Unhinged. Sarah's face darkened. She took a slow sip of her wine. My brother, honestly, he always did have a flair for the dramatic, for making himself the center of attention. But this is beyond anything I could have imagined, even from him. We settled in her sunroom, a comfortable lived-in space with overflowing bookshelves and thriving potted plants. Sarah had never married, choosing her independence, her academic career in literature, over the complexities of partnership. There were times over the years, I'll admit, I'd envied her that freedom, that quiet self-possession. So, she said, her gaze direct, what exactly did you put in that envelope? The one that made him call you, practically screaming, according to Chloe? I explained it all. The divorce filing, timed to the minute. The meticulously gathered evidence of his financial deceptions, the secret account, the lavish spending on Jenna, and most importantly, the prenup. The ironclad fidelity clause he'd long forgotten. The clause that would leave him with far, far less than he'd so confidently planned. The prenup. Sarah's eyes widened. Then a slow smile spread across her face. A smile that wasn't entirely kind. Oh, I remember when he insisted on that. Dad had just given him that seed money for his first disastrous business idea. What was it, custom pet portraits? And Marcus was so paranoid, so worried about protecting his future empire. She let out a short, bitter laugh. The irony, Daisy, is just deliciously perfect. My phone rang. Chloe. I took a deep breath, steadying myself before answering. Mom, she said immediately, her voice tight, strained. I could hear traffic noises in the background. Mom, I'm coming over to Aunt Sarah's. Right now. Honey, you don't have to. Really. It's your graduation day. You should be with your friends. I'm already on my way, she interrupted, a new firmness in her tone that I hadn't heard before. Dad is telling everyone you've lost your mind. That you've been planning this for months like some kind of vendetta. He's saying horrible things about you, Mom. Of course he was. Marcus was a master at rewriting narratives, at twisting facts until he emerged as the injured party, the misunderstood victim. It was his go-to move. Let him talk, sweetie, I said, trying to sound unconcerned. The truth has a way of coming out. It'll all become clear soon enough. 20 minutes later, Chloe arrived. She was still in her graduation dress, the dark blue silk now rumpled, her carefully applied makeup smudged from crying. The moment she saw me, she practically fell into my arms, clinging to me like she used to when she was a little girl, woken by a nightmare. Why didn't you tell me, Mom? She asked, her voice muffled against my shoulder. Why did I have to find out like that? Oh, honey. I held her tight. I didn't want to ruin your final semester. Your graduation. You worked so incredibly hard for this day. I wanted it to be yours. She pulled back, wiping her eyes with the back of her hand, a flash of anger in their depths. Well, Dad took care of ruining it anyway, didn't he? We moved into Sarah's comfortable living room. Chloe, curled up on the sofa with a cup of tea Sarah insisted on making, finally got the full story. How I'd stumbled upon the affair. The extent of the financial deception. The detailed plans Marcus and Jenna had made. right down to the celebratory dinner they'd booked for the night he was supposed to leave me. I knew something was off with Dad, Chloe admitted, staring into her teacup. He's been so different lately. Distracted. Always on his phone, jumpy. But I never ever imagined this. None of us ever want to see these things in the people we love, sweetie, Sarah said gently, sitting beside her, rubbing her back. It's easier to look away, to make excuses. My phone buzzed. A text message. It was from Mr. Henderson, my attorney. Emergency filing approved by Judge Miller. Accounts you identified are now frozen, pending divorce proceedings. Mr. Caldwell will have access only to his pre-existing personal account. Marcus now had limited access to funds. Enough for basic living expenses probably, but certainly not enough to follow through on those fancy condo purchases he'd been planning with Jenna. Not enough for much of anything beyond groceries and gas. I showed the message to Sarah, then to Chloe. A small, determined smile touched Chloe's lips. Good, she said firmly. Her voice was surprisingly strong. He deserves it. Every bit of it. My daughter's fierce loyalty, it warmed me to my core. But I also knew the complexities. He's still your father, Chloe, I reminded her gently. What's happening between us, your relationship with him is, and always will be, separate from that. You need to figure that out for yourself in your own time. Chloe shook her head, her eyes flashing. Maybe someday, Mom. Maybe. But right now I can't even look at him. He hugged me this morning, told me how proud he was, all while planning to blow up our entire family just a few hours later. How could he do that? The doorbell rang, a sharp, sudden sound that made us all jump. Sarah went to answer it, her expression wary. She returned a moment later, her lips pressed into a thin line. It's Marcus, she said, her voice low. And he's not alone. I took a deep breath, straightened my shoulders, and mentally prepared myself. Sarah led Marcus and Jenna Vance into the living room. Jenna looked deeply uncomfortable. She kept shifting her weight from one foot to the other, her eyes darting around the room, avoiding eye contact with any of us. She was 37, I'd found out. Not exactly a blushing ingenue, but still 17 years younger than me. Shoulder-length blonde hair, expensively highlighted. She had that air of brittle confidence that often comes from never having faced any real significant hardship in life. Marcus, by contrast, looked absolutely furious. The earlier desperation I'd seen at the house had hardened into a belligerent anger. His face was tight, his jaw clenched. Daisy, you need to stop this. This insanity right now, he demanded, his voice loud in the quiet room. Unfreeze the accounts. We can sit down and discuss this like reasonable adults. Chloe, bless her brave heart, stood up. She physically placed herself slightly in front of me, a small, fierce protector. Maybe you should have tried being reasonable, Dad, before you announced to everyone at my graduation party that you were leaving Mom. Marcus's eyes widened, as if he'd only just then noticed our daughter was even in the room, or perhaps only just registered her defiance. Chloe, he said, his tone shifting to one of strained patience. This doesn't involve you. Doesn't involve me? Chloe echoed, her voice incredulous, rising with each word. You blew up our family, our lives on my graduation day, and it doesn't involve me? Jenna, looking increasingly like she wished the floor would swallow her whole, touched Marcus's arm. Greg, she murmured, using his old nickname, the one I hadn't used in years. Maybe we should just go. He shook her hand off, annoyed. No. I'm not leaving until Daisy agrees to be rational about this. Until she stops this vendetta. Sarah, who had been watching silently from the doorway, folded her arms across her chest. Actually, Marcus, she said, her voice cool and cutting, my sister-in-law seems to be the only rational person in this entire scenario. You're the one who created this mess. You. I remained seated on the sofa, watching the drama unfold as if from a distance. For so many years I had been the peacemaker in our family, the one who smoothed over conflicts, who mediated disputes, who kept everyone happy, or at least pretended to. That role, it was exhausting, and I had finally blessedly set it down. The accounts will remain frozen until the preliminary hearing, Marcus, I said calmly, my voice carrying easily in the suddenly silent room. That's scheduled for 3 days from now. The judge will determine the appropriate division of assets and any interim support at that time. 3 days, Marcus sputtered, his face turning a shade redder. What am I supposed to do for 3 days? How am I supposed to live? You have your personal account, Marcus, I reminded him, my tone devoid of sympathy. The one you've been diligently funneling money into for the past year. I imagine that should be more than sufficient for your immediate needs. Jenna's head whipped around to look at Marcus, her eyes narrowed. You have a separate account? With how much in it, Greg? An interesting dynamic was emerging. Clearly, Marcus hadn't been entirely forthcoming with his new partner in life either. The cracks in their united front were already beginning to show, and they were widening fast. Marcus ignored her pointed question, his attention solely on me. This is vindictive, Daisy. This isn't like you. You're not this cruel. Perhaps you never really knew me, Marcus, I replied, my voice soft but unwavering. Just as I, apparently, never really knew you. Chloe, emboldened, turned to Jenna. Her voice, though quiet, was laced with steel. Did you know? Did you know he was going to announce it like that? At my graduation celebration? In front of all our friends and family? Jenna, to her credit, actually had the decency to look ashamed. Her eyes dropped to the floor. I thought, she stammered. I thought he was going to talk to your mother privately. First. The public announcement today, that was unexpected. I didn't know he planned that. Marcus shot Jenna a look of pure betrayal. Oh, the irony. I think you both should leave, Sarah said firmly, stepping forward. Her voice was low, but carried an unmistakable authority. You've upset Chloe and Daisy quite enough for one day. Chloe, Marcus pleaded, turning to our daughter, his voice suddenly wheedling. You understand, don't you? Relationships change. Sometimes people just grow apart. My daughter's face, which had been soft with tears just moments before, hardened into an expression I had never seen on her before. An expression that mirrored, frighteningly, my own resolve. What I understand, Dad, she said, her voice cold and clear, is that you're a coward. A coward who couldn't even give Mom the basic dignity of a private conversation after 28 years of marriage. What I understand, she continued, her voice gaining strength, is that you were stealing from our family, from me, while I was working 2 part-time jobs to help pay for my textbooks because you kept saying money was tight. That's what I understand. Marcus paled, visibly. That's not how it was, Chloe. You're twisting things. It's exactly how it was. Chloe cut him off, her eyes blazing. Please leave, Dad. Just please go. I can't even look at you right now. The silence that followed was heavy, suffocating. Finally, Marcus, defeated, turned to go. Jenna, looking relieved and utterly mortified, trailed silently behind him. At the door, Marcus paused. He looked back at me, his eyes filled with a strange mixture of anger, disbelief, and was it a flicker of fear? This isn't over, Daisy, he said, his voice a low growl. I'll fight you on this. Every step of the way. I met his gaze steadily, unflinchingly. You're welcome to try, Marcus. After they left, the front door closing with a quiet click, Chloe collapsed next to me on the sofa, fresh tears streaming down her face. I've never talked to Dad like that in my entire life, she whispered, her voice trembling. I wrapped my arm around her shaking shoulders, pulling her close. Sometimes, sweetheart, I said softly, stroking her hair. Standing up for what's right, for what you believe in, it's painful. It's one of the hardest things you'll ever do. Sarah reappeared, having seen them out. She came back with our wine glasses refilled. She raised hers. To new beginnings, she said, her voice firm, her eyes meeting mine over the rim of her glass. Indeed, I thought, taking a sip. This ending, however painful, however messy, it was also undeniably the beginning of something new, something unknown. And for the first time in a very, very long time, that felt hopeful. The preliminary hearing took place in a small, rather drab courtroom on a rainy Tuesday morning. The kind of room where important, life-altering decisions are made every day. Yet it felt utterly impersonal. I arrived with Mr. Henderson, my attorney, a calm, reassuring presence by my side. Marcus came with a lawyer he'd obviously retained in a hurry, a young, nervous-looking associate from a large corporate law firm, someone who looked more comfortable with spreadsheets than with separation agreements. Marcus's poor choice of legal representation, I reflected, was just another predictable consequence of his rushed, ill-conceived planning. He'd always valued flash over substance. The judge, an older woman named Judge Miller, with sharp, intelligent eyes and absolutely no patience for theatrics or melodrama, reviewed the prenuptial agreement with meticulous care. She peered over the top of her reading glasses at Marcus's young, increasingly flustered attorney. "This document appears to be entirely in order, counselor," she said, her voice crisp and businesslike. "Do you contest its fundamental validity?" The young lawyer cleared his throat, shuffling his papers. "Your Honor, we believe the agreement has, in effect, expired due to the significant length of time that has passed since its initial signing. 28 years is a considerable period." Judge Miller raised an eyebrow. Counselor, Section 18, subsection B of this document clearly states, and I quote, "The terms and conditions of this agreement shall remain in full force and effect for the entire term of the marriage, and shall extend to cover any and all legal proceedings resulting from its dissolution, until such time as a final decree of divorce is issued and all matters pertaining to the division of assets and liabilities are fully and finally resolved by this court or by mutual written consent of both parties." She looked up. "There is no expiration date indicated, counselor. The duration is explicitly tied to the marriage itself and its legal dissolution." Marcus leaned forward, whispering urgently, frantically, to his lawyer, who looked like he wished he were anywhere else on earth. "Furthermore," Judge Miller continued, her gaze sweeping over the financial statements I had provided, "the evidence presented regarding systematic fund transfers to an undisclosed personal account appears, on its face, to be a potential violation of the financial disclosure requirements outlined in Section 23 of this same agreement." She shuffled through a stack of papers, then looked up again, her expression unreadable. "Therefore, I am ruling to maintain the existing freeze on all joint marital accounts, pending full and complete financial discovery from both parties. Mr. Caldwell's pre-existing personal account, the one he established prior to these proceedings, will remain accessible to him for reasonable living expenses. The family home on Maple Street will remain in Mrs. Caldwell's sole possession and used during these proceedings, as is stipulated in the prenuptial agreement's infidelity clause, specifically Section 12, subsection C." Marcus's face flushed a dark, angry red. I could see a vein throbbing in his temple. This is outrageous," he muttered, just loud enough for me, and probably the court reporter, to hear. Judge Miller fixed him with a steely, unimpressed look. "Mr. Caldwell," she said, her voice dropping a full octave, "I strongly suggest you take the next 30 days to review very carefully the agreement you signed. This court will reconvene in 30 days for the full hearing, after complete financial discovery has been submitted by both parties. Until then, these orders stand." As Mr. Henderson and I left the courtroom, Marcus caught up to me in the hallway. The anger seemed to have drained out of him, replaced by a desperate, pleading look. "Daisy, please," he said, his voice low, almost a whisper. We need to talk about this. Reasonably. 28 years together. It has to count for something. It just has to. I stopped and looked at him. Really looked at him. The expensive suit, now slightly rumpled. The tired eyes. The faint sheen of sweat on his forehead. It counted for everything, Marcus, I replied, my voice quiet but firm. It counted for absolutely everything. Until you decided it didn't. I turned and walked away, Mr. Henderson falling into step beside me, leaving Marcus standing alone in the echoing marble corridor of the courthouse. The weight of his choices, the real, tangible consequences were finally, it seemed, beginning to sink in. Word spread like wildfire through our relatively small Springfield social circle. Friends, or people I had once considered friends, called daily. Some, a precious few, offered genuine, quiet support. Others, the majority, were clearly just fishing for gossip, for the salacious details of our very public implosion. I maintained a dignified silence about the specifics, simply saying when asked, "Marcus and I are separating. These things happen, unfortunately. It's a difficult time." I refused to feed the rumor mill. My dignity was one thing Marcus couldn't take from me. Meanwhile, Marcus's carefully constructed public facade was crumbling, faster than he could patch it up. The image he had so painstakingly cultivated for years, successful local entrepreneur, devoted family man, pillar of the community, was tarnished. Likely beyond repair. The financial freeze meant he couldn't follow through on any of the grand promises he'd made to Jenna. The charming lakeside condo they'd been planning to purchase together? That fell through spectacularly. The deposit was lost. The new luxury SUV he'd put a down payment on, the one meant to impress her? That had to be canceled, incurring more fees. His carefully curated illusion of wealth and success was evaporating before his very eyes. About 2 weeks after that first hearing, Sarah called me. There was a distinct note of amusement, and perhaps a little vindication in her voice. "Have you heard the latest, Daisy?" she asked, not even bothering with pleasantries. "I'm almost afraid to ask," I said, though a part of me was definitely curious. "Jenna Vance," Sarah announced, drawing out the name. She moved out, packed her bags, and left Marcus high and dry. Already? I wasn't entirely surprised, if I was being honest. But the speed of her departure was impressive. Apparently, Sarah continued, clearly relishing the telling, she discovered that Marcus's much-vaunted thriving business isn't actually thriving at all. Hasn't been for years. And those substantial savings he kept alluding to? They don't actually exist. Not beyond that little bit he siphoned off, anyway. She apparently told her friend Jennifer. You know Jennifer from the book club? That she didn't sign up to date a man with financial problems and a bad attitude. I couldn't help it. I laughed. A real genuine laugh. The first one in what felt like ages. He always was good at creating illusions, wasn't he? I said. Just not so good at maintaining them under pressure. And me? I was rebuilding. Slowly, steadily, piece by piece. The financial security I had always quietly maintained, separate from our joint accounts, the just-in-case fund I'd built over decades, that gave me a freedom Marcus hadn't anticipated, hadn't even known about. He'd underestimated me on every single level. I rented a small, sunny office space downtown, in one of those older buildings with good bones and lots of character. And I began, finally, to set up the consultancy I had dreamed about for so many years. Second Chapter Financial, I called it. Felt right. My very first clients were 2 women, both going through difficult, contentious divorces just like me. They'd heard about my situation through the grapevine, through Sarah, actually. Word of mouth, the best kind of advertising, brought more. I found my niche, my passion. Helping women understand and take control of their finances, especially during major life transitions. Divorces, widowhood, career changes, sudden inheritances. The work was immediately fulfilling. In a deep, meaningful way that my corporate job at Finso Solutions, with its endless spreadsheets and quarterly reports, never ever had been. Chloe, who had accepted a great job offer with a marketing firm down in Charleston, called me regularly, her voice full of pride and excitement for me. "I'm so incredibly proud of you, Mom," she told me during one of our calls, after I described my growing client list and a particularly satisfying case I'd helped a woman navigate. "You're actually helping people. You're making a real difference in their lives, especially when they're at their lowest point." "I'm just doing what I wish someone had been there to do for me, much earlier in my life, sweetie," I replied, and it was true. Preparing women for whatever might come, helping them find their financial footing, their independence, being needed for my expertise, for my knowledge and skills, rather than for my caregiving or my ability to smooth things over. It was a novel experience, and it was incredibly, wonderfully empowering. I was discovering a strength in myself I hadn't known I possessed. The final divorce hearing, ironically, fell on what would have been Marcus's and my 29th wedding anniversary. A strangely fitting, if poignant, end to a chapter of my life that had spanned nearly 3 decades. Marcus arrived at the courthouse looking haggard, defeated. I learned later through Sarah that his custom cutting board business was struggling badly without my quiet financial acumen and practical support behind the scenes. He'd never really understood the numbers, just the vague idea of being an artisan. Jenna, of course, was long gone. Already, according to Springfield gossip, dating some flashy real estate developer from Savannah. Most of our former mutual friends, once they learned the full, unvarnished story of his deception and cruelty, had quietly distanced themselves from him. He was, in effect, alone. The judge, the same no-nonsense Judge Miller, upheld the prenuptial agreement in its entirety. Every clause, every stipulation. Marcus left the marriage with his personal possessions, his failing business, and the rapidly dwindling funds in his private account, which, after paying his now very disgruntled corporate lawyer's hefty fees, was barely enough to secure a small furnished apartment on the outskirts of town. I retained our home on Maple Street, my own retirement accounts, and a full 70% of our joint investments and assets, exactly as the prenuptial agreement stipulated in documented cases of infidelity. The justice of it, the sheer poetic irony, was not lost on me. The very document Marcus had insisted upon all those years ago, to protect himself from me, had become the instrument of his own financial undoing. As we left the courtroom, Mr. Henderson giving my arm a congratulatory squeeze, Marcus approached me one last time. He looked older, smaller somehow. "I made a terrible mistake, Daisy," he said quietly, his voice hoarse. He wasn't looking at me, but at some point on the wall just past my shoulder. "A series of them. Is there any chance at all that we could?" "No, Marcus," I interrupted, gentle but absolutely firm. There was no anger left, no bitterness, just a quiet finality. "That door is closed. And it's locked." He nodded slowly. I understand," he replied. And for once, for the very first time in what felt like an eternity, I actually believed he did. He finally looked at me then, a flicker of something unreadable in his eyes. "Regret? Resignation? I hope you find happiness, Daisy. You deserve it." It was perhaps the first truly honest, unselfish thing he had said to me in years. 6 months later, second chapter financial was thriving. I'd moved from that small, sunny office to a larger suite of rooms in the same building, and had even hired 2 part-time associates, both bright, empathetic women who shared my vision. I specialized in helping women secure their financial futures, in empowering them to take control, particularly through those major, often traumatic life changes. I was busy. I was fulfilled. I was happy. Chloe visited often from Charleston, her pride in what I had built, what I had become, shining in her eyes. "You know what's really ironic, Mom?" she said during one of her weekend visits, as we were sharing a bottle of wine on my newly repainted porch, watching the fireflies start to blink in the twilight. If Dad had just been honest from the beginning, if he just told you he was unhappy, wanted to leave, even if he'd been fair about the money, he probably would have kept half of everything. Maybe even more, if you'd wanted to be generous. I smiled a real contented smile. Sometimes, sweetie, I replied, swirling the wine in my glass. People just can't see beyond what they want in that exact moment. They get so caught up in their own desires, their own narratives, that they lose sight of everything else. And everyone else. The woman who had once defined herself almost entirely as Marcus Caldwell's wife and Chloe's mother, she had discovered a new identity. Several, in fact. Mentor, business owner, advocate, friend. And most importantly, a woman standing firmly on her own 2 feet, in her own strength. That cream-colored envelope I had handed Marcus in the noisy, crowded community hall all those months ago. It hadn't just been my meticulously planned escape route from a dying marriage. It had been the key to a door I hadn't even realized existed. A door to a future I had never dared to imagine for myself. And behind it, I found not just justice, not just revenge, though there was a quiet satisfaction in that, I won't lie. I found something far more valuable, far more lasting. I found reinvention. In securing my financial future, in reclaiming what was rightfully mine, I had also reclaimed something I hadn't even known I'd lost, myself. My quiet, steady, resilient self. If this story hit close to home for you, if you've ever had to find your own strength in the quiet after a storm, I'd love to hear your story. Drop a comment below. I read them all, truly. Sometimes just knowing you're not alone makes all the difference. If you found a little bit of your own strength reflected here, or maybe just a reason to keep going, consider subscribing to the channel. We share stories like this every week. And if you feel moved to support what we do here at TK Revenge Story through Super Thanks, well, thank you from the bottom of my heart. Sometimes giving back, even in small ways, is part of the healing journey too. Take care of yourselves.